The ancient city of Hilaris stretched across the horizon like a metallic mirage, its spires piercing the amber sky of Aranthia. In the year 3247, the city stood as a testament to survival half destroyed by the intergalactic war, yet stubbornly alive. The ceasefire had been signed only weeks ago, but peace remained as fragile as the crumbling architecture that defined the cityscape. Auron Sol walked the narrow streets with the practiced caution of a man who had seen too much combat. His military-grade prosthetic leg made a soft whirring sound with each step, the only reminder of his service to the Federation. The war had taken his leg, and something else, something deeper that medical nanites couldn't repair. Purpose, perhaps, or faith in humanity's future among the stars. The markets of Lower Hilaris buzzed with activity as merchants from a dozen different species hawked their wares. Holographic signs flickered in various languages, advertising everything from Terran whiskey to Jovian healing crystals. Auron paid them little attention. He had credits enough for a few more days of food and shelter. And after that, well, he hadn't planned that far ahead. Or water for the weary traveler. A voice cut through his thoughts. An old woman with skin the color of burnished copper held out a clay cup. Her eyes, milky with cataracts, somehow seemed to look straight through him. "I have no credits to spare," Auron replied, his voice rough from disuse. The old woman smiled, revealing teeth filed to points in the tradition of the ancient Aranthian tribes. "No charge for those who bear the marks of war. The spirits recognize their own." Reluctantly, Auron accepted the cup. The water tasted sweet, with an unfamiliar mineral tang. "Thank you," he said, returning the empty vessel. "You walk toward the temple district," the woman observed, "seeking absolution?" Auron shrugged. "Just walking. The Veil priestesses say no one just walks to the temples. The spirits guide our feet even when our minds believe they wander." She reached out and touched his chest, just above his heart. "You carry a great emptiness, but emptiness is merely space waiting to be filled." Before Auron could respond, a commotion erupted further down the street. Shouts and the distinctive sound of pulse rifles charging echoed between the buildings. Instinct took over. Auron's hand went to his side, where his service weapon would have been, only to grasp empty air. The Federation had reclaimed all military hardware upon his discharge. Still, he moved toward the disturbance. Old habits died hard. The scene unfolded like a familiar nightmare. A squad of soldiers not Federation by their mismatched armor had cornered a group of civilians against a crumbling wall. The civilians weren't human. They were Kyra, a species known for their slight frames and luminescent skin that shifted colors with their emotions. Currently, their skin pulsed a terrified violet. "Rebel faction," Auron muttered to himself, recognizing the insignia on the soldier's armor. These were the remnants of the Korath Brigade, a splinter group that had rejected the ceasefire and continued to wage their private war. "You harbor Federation sympathizers," one soldier shouted, his rifle trained on the tallest of the Kira, who stood protectively in front of the others. "The punishment is death." "We harbor no one," the Kyra replied, his skin now a defiant crimson. "We are healers, not warriors." "Lies!" The soldier fired a warning shot that struck the wall inches from the Kyra's head. "We tracked a Federation signal to this district. You will surrender them, or we will execute you all as examples." Auron assessed the situation with the cold calculation of a veteran. 6 soldiers against 5 Kyra, one of whom appeared to be a child. The rebels had pulse rifles and at least one plasma grenade visible on a belt. The Kyra were unarmed. As far as he could tell, it wasn't a fight. It was an execution in the making. He should walk away. This wasn't his war anymore. The Federation had made that clear when they discharged him after his injuries. Honorably, they'd called it, as if that word could fill the void left by years of service. Yet his feet refused to move in any direction but forward. "Hey," Oren called out, instantly regretting the impulse. "Federation amnesty extends to all civilians, including Chira. The war is over." The soldiers turned as one, weapons now trained on this new threat. The leader, a scarred man with cybernetic enhancements visible around his left eye, sneered. "The war ends when we say it ends. Fed lover, this doesn't concern you." "I'm making it my concern," Oren replied, spreading his empty hands to show he was unarmed. "Let them go. They're no threat to you." The leader laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "And what will you do if we don't? Call your Federation friends? I can smell a discharged soldier from a parsec away. You're nothing now." The words struck true, but Oren kept his face impassive. "I'm offering you a chance to walk away without blood on your hands." "Too late for that," the leader said and nodded to one of his men. "Everything happened in a blur after that." The soldier aimed at the Chira child, whose skin had turned a pale, terrified blue. The pulse rifle charged with the distinctive whine that had haunted Oron's nightmares. Without conscious thought, he launched himself forward, crossing the distance in 3 long strides. The rifle discharged. Oren felt the familiar searing pain of energy weapons as the bolt struck him squarely in the chest. He stumbled, falling to one knee before the child, who stared at him with wide, multifaceted eyes the color of starlight. Time seemed to slow. Oren was aware of shouting, of the Chira moving, of a new figure entering the Freya woman in the flowing robes of a vile priestess, her hands glowing with the energy manipulation that made her order both revered and feared. The last thing Oren saw before consciousness left him was the child's skin changing from fearful blue to a warm, grateful gold. Darkness came as an old friend. Oren awakened to the scent of incense and the soft murmur of chanting. His chest burned as if branded, but the pain was distant, manageable. He tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as vertigo washed over him. "Be still," a woman's voice commanded, "that the binding is still fresh." Forcing his eyes open, Oren found himself in a high-ceilinged chamber, illuminated by floating orbs of soft blue light. He lay on a stone altar, his chest bare except for an intricate pattern of symbols painted in what looked disturbingly like dried blood. Standing over him was the veiled priestess he had glimpsed before losing consciousness. Up close, she was younger than he'd expected, perhaps in her early 30s, with sharp features and eyes so dark they seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Her robes, a deep indigo embroidered with silver sigils, marked her as high-ranking within the order. "Where am I?" Oren asked, his voice a rasp. "The Temple of Vailari," she replied. "I am Vailari, first priestess of the Veil Order. You are fortunate to be alive. Federation soldier." "Ex-Federation," Oren corrected automatically. "What happened? The Chira, the child." "Safe, thanks to your intervention." Vailari moved to a nearby table and returned with a cup containing a viscous green liquid. "Drink. It will help with the pain." Oren hesitated, then accepted the cup. The liquid tasted bitter but sent a wave of warmth through his body, dulling the fire in his chest. "The rebels?" he asked after draining the cup. "He fled when I arrived. They fear the Veil, as they should." A hint of pride colored her voice. "Though I suspect they will return with greater numbers. Their leader, Thane Korath, is not known for accepting defeat gracefully." Oren nodded. He had heard of Korath during the war, a brilliant but ruthless commander who had broken from Federation command when they wouldn't authorize his more extreme tactics. the kind of man who saw civilians as acceptable collateral damage. "Why did you help me?" he asked. "The vial remained neutral during the war." Vailari's expression became unreadable. "I did not help you for your sake, Federation soldier. I helped you because of the child." As if summoned by her words, a small figure appeared in the doorway, the Chira child from the confrontation. In the temple light, Oren could see her more clearly. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 by human reckoning, with the characteristic translucent skin of her species now glowing a curious mixture of gold and green. Her eyes, multifaceted like gems, reflected the floating lights in mesmerizing patterns. "Ember," Vailari called softly. "Come, he is awake." The child approached cautiously, stopping at the foot of the altar. She studied Oren with obvious curiosity. "You jumped in front of the bad light," she said in accented but clear standard. "Why?" It was a good question, one Oren wasn't entirely sure he could answer. "Instinct," he said finally. "I couldn't let them hurt a child." Ember's skin shifted to a warmer gold. "Thank you. Father says you are bloodbound now." Oren shot a questioning glance at Vailari, who sighed. "I performed a ritual to save your life," she explained. "The pulse weapon should have killed you instantly. It burned through your chest cavity and damaged your heart. You had moments to live. Yet here I am," Oren observed. "Yes, here you are." Vailari's tone suggested she wasn't entirely pleased with this outcome. "The ritual I performed is not commonly practiced. It binds life forces together, creating a channel through which energy can flow. In this case, between you and Ember." Oren frowned. "You're saying we're connected somehow?" "It is more than connection. It is symbiosis." Vailari touched the dried blood symbols on his chest. "Her life force sustains yours, and in return, your strength protects her. The bond will fade in time, but for now, you are as linked as parent and child." "That's not possible," Oren protested. "Different species, different biological systems. The vial do not deal in biology. Federation soldier. We deal in spirit energy, in the forces that transcend physical form." Vailari's voice hardened. "The ritual worked because it was necessary. Ember's clan considers her sacred, a future seer with rare gifts even among the Chira. Her death would have devastated their community. And my death wouldn't have mattered," Oren concluded. To his surprise, Ember moved closer and placed a small, cool hand on his arm. "Your death would have mattered to me," she said simply. Her skin pulsed with a deep, sincere blue. Despite himself, Oren felt something stir within the emptiness he had carried since the war, a small spark of warmth, of connection. "Rest now," Vailari instructed. "The binding requires time to stabilize. We will speak more when you are stronger." As she ushered Ember from the room, Oren called out, "Why help at all? Why not let me die and take the child to safety?" Vailari paused at the doorway. "Because Ember refused to leave your side. She sensed something in you worth saving." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "The Chira believe that those who sacrifice without expectation of reward are touched by the divine. In their eyes, you are now a sacred protector." With that unsettling thought, she left Oren alone with the floating lights and the unfamiliar sensation of being needed. Days passed in a haze of healing and strange dreams. Oren drifted between consciousness and a peculiar state where he seemed to perceive emotions and colors that weren't his own. Sometimes he would awaken feeling inexplicably afraid, only to learn later that Ember had experienced a nightmare at that exact moment. Other times, a sense of peace would wash over him for no apparent reason. Coinciding with Ember's meditation sessions with the temple acolytes, the blood symbols on his chest faded but left behind faint silver scars in the same pattern. Valerie explained that these were the physical manifestation of the Bonda roadmap of the energy channels now connecting him to Ember. On the seventh day, Oren was strong enough to leave his bed. He found himself in a small, Spartanly furnished chamber within the temple complex. His old clothes had been cleaned and mended, laid out alongside a set of simple robes similar to those worn by temple acolytes. After a moment's hesitation, he chose his own clothes. Whatever he had become in this strange place, he wasn't a religious convert. The temple was a marvel of ancient architecture, with soaring ceilings supported by columns carved to resemble twisting vines. Everywhere, the symbol of the Vial Ordera circle bisected by a vertical line was prominently displayed in silver and blue. Acolytes moved through the halls with purpose, some carrying scrolls, others engaged in what appeared to be energy manipulation exercises, their hands glowing with controlled power. Oren found Vailari in a small courtyard garden, supervising Ember as the child practiced a series of fluid movements that seemed halfway between dance and martial art. The priestess nodded in acknowledgement as he approached. "Your recovery progresses well," she observed, "faster than I anticipated." "I've always been a quick healer," Oren replied. Ember stopped her practice and ran to him, her skin shifting to a pleased yellow gold. "Oren, you're walking!" He found himself smiling at her enthusiasm. "Looks that way. What are you learning?" "Energy focusing," the child replied proudly. "Vailari says I have strong potential." "She does," Vailari confirmed. "The Kyra naturally manipulate energy through their emotional states, but Ember shows unusual control for one so young." She gestured for the child to continue her practice, then turned to Oren. "We need to discuss your situation." Oren nodded. "I assume I can't stay here indefinitely." "No. The temple provides sanctuary, but it is temporary, especially now that Korath knows of our involvement." Vailari's expression was grave. "His forces have been seen scouting the temple district. It is only a matter of time before they make another attempt to capture Ember." "Why? What would rebels want with a Kyra child?" Vailari hesitated, glancing at Ember to ensure she was out of earshot. "The Kyra possess unique biological properties. Their emotional states produce chemical changes in their bodies that can affect other species. Healing, calming, even inducing euphoria. These abilities are strongest in their seers." Understanding dawned. He wants to weaponize her. Yes, imagine soldiers exposed to chemicals that eliminate fear, increase aggression, or create unquestioning loyalty. Korath has long been fascinated by such possibilities. Vailari's voice hardened. He tried to negotiate with the Kyra elders during the war, offering protection in exchange for access to their biochemistry. They refused, so now he takes by force what he couldn't get through diplomacy. Oren had seen it countless times during the war, the desperate scramble for any advantage, regardless of ethical considerations. Precisely, and he will not stop with Ember. She is merely the beginning, the most vulnerable and potentially the most powerful. Oren looked at the child, now sitting cross-legged with her eyes closed, her skin a serene blue as she concentrated on her exercises. Something protective stirred within him. "What's the plan, then?" he asked. "Ember's clan has a sanctuary deep in the Zephyra forest. It is hidden by both natural barriers and Kyra energy manipulation. If we can reach it, she will be safe among her people." Vailari studied him intently. "The journey is dangerous, especially now. The forest has grown wild since the war, and Korath's forces patrol the outskirts. You want me to escort her? The bond between you makes you uniquely qualified. You will sense danger to her before it manifests, and your military training provides skills I lack." Vilari's expression softened slightly. Additionally, she trusts you. That is not insignificant. Auron considered his options. He could walk away. The bond would eventually fade, according to Vilari, and he could return to his aimless wandering. But the thought of Ember in Korath's hands, being studied and exploited like a laboratory specimen, was surprisingly intolerable. "When do we leave?" he asked finally. Relief flickered across Vilari's face. "Tonight, after the second moonrise. I have arranged transport to the forest edge, but from there, we must proceed on foot." "We?" Auron raised an eyebrow. "I am coming with you," Vilari stated in a tone that brooked no argument. "The ritual that binds you to Ember requires monitoring, and I have knowledge of the forest paths. Besides," she added with the ghost of a smile, "someone must ensure you do not corrupt the child with Federation pragmatism." Despite himself, Auron found himself returning her smile. "Fair enough, priestess." That night, under the twin moons of Aranthia, they slipped from the temple through ancient passages known only to the highest-ranking Viel priestesses. Ember, dressed in a hooded cloak that concealed her luminescent skin, kept close to Auron's side. Vilari led them through the labyrinthine streets of the lower city, avoiding the main thoroughfares where rebel patrols might be watching. Their transport, a weathered hover cart pulled by a beast that resembled a cross between an ox and a lizard, waited at a small farm beyond the city walls. The farmer, an old man with ritual scars similar to those worn by the Viel priestesses, bowed deeply to Vilari. "The path is watched, First Priestess," he warned as they climbed aboard. "Strangers in rebel colors pass through at dusk, asking questions about Kyra movements. We will be cautious, Elder Mikon," Vilari assured him. "May the energies flow in your favor." "And in yours," the old man replied, touching his forehead in ritual farewell. The journey to the forest edge took most of the night. They traveled in silence. The only sounds the soft whirring of the hover cart's ancient engines and the occasional call of nocturnal wildlife. Ember eventually fell asleep against Auron's side. Her skin dimmed to a restful amber. Vilari watched them with an unreadable expression. "The bond strengthens," she observed quietly. "Is that good or bad?" Auron asked. "It simply is. Though it complicates matters for her clan. The Chira do not typically form deep attachments to outsiders, especially humans. They remember the early colonization attempts too well." Auron nodded. He had studied the history during his Federation training. When humans first discovered Aranthia, they had attempted to establish colonies without proper understanding of the indigenous cultures. The resulting conflicts had nearly wiped out several species, including the Kyra, before the Federation established proper first contact protocols. "Will they accept her back with this bond to me?" Vilari's expression grew troubled. "They will accept her. Whether they will accept the bond is another matter. There are rituals that could sever it, though they carry risks." The thought was surprisingly distressing. Auron had grown accustomed to the gentle presence of Ember in his consciousness, a small light in the darkness he had carried since the war. "Let's focus on getting her there safely," he said. "We can worry about rituals later." The forest loomed before them as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon. The Zephyra was unlike any forest Auron had seen on other worlds. The trees towered hundreds of meters into the sky, their trunks wider than buildings, their bark a deep purple that seemed to absorb light. Luminescent fungi clung to their bases, casting an eerie blue glow over the underbrush. The farmer stopped the hover cart at the forest edge. "I go no further," he said firmly. "The Zephyra does not welcome machinery or those who lack respect for its ways." They disembarked, Oren gently waking Ember, who blinked sleepily at the massive trees. "A home is close," she murmured, her skin shifting to a homesick green-blue. "I can feel the clan songs." Valerie consulted a small device that appeared to be measuring energy fluctuations rather than physical landmarks. "The sanctuary is 3 days' journey on foot, following the old pilgrim path. We must be vigilant. The forest harbors many dangers besides Korath's men." Oron checked the small pack of supplies they had brought: nutrient bars, water purifiers, a basic medical kit, and a single pulse pistol that Vailari had somehow acquired. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. As they prepared to enter the forest, a distant sound caught Oren's attention: the distinctive whine of military-grade hoverbikes. "A company," he warned, scanning the horizon. In the growing light, he could make out a dust cloud approaching rapidly from the direction of the city. "Rebel scouts," Vailari confirmed, her expression grim. "They must have followed our trail despite our precautions." "Into the forest," Oren decided, taking Ember's hand. "The trees will provide cover." They plunged into the Zephyr's embrace, leaving the open plains behind. The forest swallowed them into a world of filtered light and strange sounds. The massive trees grew so closely together that within minutes, the forest edge was no longer visible. It was like entering another world entirely, one where humanity's wars seemed distant and irrelevant. But the whine of hoverbikes reminded them that conflict had followed them even here. The sound grew louder, then stopped abruptly. "They've reached the edge," Oren said, pulling Ember behind a massive root structure. "They'll continue on foot from here." Vailari nodded, her hands beginning to glow with the energy manipulation techniques of her order. "I can mask our energy signatures for a time, but it will slow our progress." "Do it," Oren said, "better slow than captured." As Vailari began a series of intricate gestures, chanting softly in the ancient language of the vial, Oren felt a strange sensation wash over him, like being submerged in cool water. Ember gasped softly, her skin shifting to match the purple blue of the forest floor. "Camouflage," she whispered with a child's delight, "like forest swimming." Despite the danger, Oren found himself smiling at her enthusiasm. "Stay close," he instructed, "and try to step where I step. We need to leave as little trail as possible." They moved deeper into the forest, following a barely discernible path that Vailari identified as the pilgrimage route. The priestess maintained her energy manipulation, though Oron could see the strain it placed on her. Sweat beaded on her forehead, and her movements became increasingly deliberate as she focused on sustaining the camouflage effect. For hours they traveled in tense silence, stopping only when necessary to rest or listen for pursuit. By midday, the sounds of their hunters had faded, but Oron knew better than to assume they had given up. Korath was nothing if not persistent. As the day wore on, the forest grew denser and stranger. Floating spores drifted between the trees, glowing with internal light. Creatures that resembled a cross between birds and lizards watched from high branches with intelligent eyes. Once, they passed a clearing where stone monoliths arranged in a perfect circle suggested ancient rituals long forgotten. "A Vail meditation site," Vailari explained when Oron questioned it. "From before the schism that divided our order into temple dwellers and forest walkers. The energy convergence here is particularly strong." "Is that good for us?" Oren asked, noting how the stones seemed to shimmer slightly in his peripheral vision. "It masks our presence further," Vailari confirmed, "but it may also attract attention from the forest guardians." "Guardians? You didn't mention those before." Vailari's expression grew cautious. "The Zephyrah is more than a collection of flora and fauna. Federation soldier. It is a conscious entity in its own right, or so the Kyra believe." They say it manifests guardians to test those who would seek sanctuary within its depths. Great, Oren muttered. More complications. Ember, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly clutched Oren's hand tighter. Someone's coming, she whispered, her skin paling to an alarmed white. Oren listened but heard nothing beyond the normal forest sounds. Then he felt a prickling sensation at the back of his neck, the battlefield instinct that had saved his life countless times during the war. Down, he ordered, pulling Ember behind one of the stone monoliths. Vailari followed without question, her energy manipulation shifting to a more focused form that Oren recognized as defensive rather than concealing. Moments later, a group of figures emerged from the forest path behind them. They weren't rebels. Their movements were too fluid, too in harmony with the forest. They were Kyra, but unlike any Oren had seen before, where Ember and the city-dwelling Kyra had thin, almost fragile builds. These were taller, more muscular, their skin a deep forest green marked with ritual patterns in luminescent silver. Forest clan, Ember breathed, a mixture of awe and fear in her voice. The Wild Ones. The leader of the group stopped, his multifaceted eyes scanning the clearing with predatory intensity. He carried a staff made from what appeared to be crystallized tree sap, its tip glowing with contained energy. I know you are here, city dwellers, he called in heavily accented standard. The forest speaks of your passing. Show yourselves or be hunted as intruders. Vailari exchanged a glance with Oren, who nodded slightly. Better to face these Kyra directly than to be treated as enemies. Slowly, they emerged from behind the monolith. Ember stayed partially hidden behind Oren, her skin shifting nervously between white and green. The forest Kyra tensed at their appearance, staffs raised defensively. Their leader's eyes widened at the sight of Ember, then narrowed as they took in Oren and Vailari. A light child travels with human and Vael, he observed, his tone making it clear how unusual he found this. Explain your presence in the sacred forest. Vailari stepped forward, hands open in the universal gesture of peace. I am Vailari, first priestess of the Temple of Vailari. We seek passage to the Central Grove Sanctuary. This child is Ember of the Healer clan, pursued by those who would exploit her gifts. The leader's skin rippled with skepticism. And the human. The forest remembers the destruction humans brought. Before Vailari could answer, Ember moved from behind Oren. He is my protector, she said in a clear voice that carried surprising authority for a child. He took the death light meant for me. We are blood-bound by Vael ritual. Murmurs spread through the forest Kyra at this revelation. Their leader approached, studying Oren with intense scrutiny. Show the binding, he demanded. Reluctantly, Oren pulled aside his shirt to reveal the silvery scars on his chest, the remnants of Vailari's ritual. The forest Kyra leader inhaled sharply. The pattern of eternal guardian, he said, something like awe in his voice. Not seen in 7 generations. He turned to his companions, speaking rapidly in the liquid language of the Kyra. The discussion seemed heated, with several warriors gesturing emphatically toward Oren. Finally, the leader turned back to them. I am Sylvan, pathfinder of the Forest Clan. We will escort you to the Central Grove. His multifaceted eyes fixed on Oren with a mixture of respect and wariness. The elders will want to examine this binding. It is unprecedented for a human to bear such marks. Is that good or bad? Oren asked, echoing his earlier question to Vailari. Sylvan's skin shifted to a thoughtful purple. It is significant. Whether good or bad depends on the will of the ancestors. With that cryptic statement, the forest Kyra formed a protective formation around them, and they continued deeper into the Zephyra. The presence of the forest Kyra changed the nature of their journey. where before they had moved cautiously. Now they traveled with confidence, following hidden paths that seemed to appear and disappear as they passed. The forest itself seemed to respond to the forest clan, branches shifting to clear their way, luminescent fungi brightening to illuminate difficult passages. Ember walked alongside Sylvan, her initial fear replaced by curiosity as she peppered him with questions about forest life. The Pathfinder answered with surprising patience, his initially stern demeanor softening in the presence of the child. Vailari fell into step beside Oron, her energy manipulation no longer necessary with the forest clan's protection. "This is unexpected," she murmured. "The forest clan rarely interacts with outsiders, even other Kira. They seem impressed by this binding between Ember and me." Oren observed. "Why?" Vailari hesitated. "When I performed the ritual, I used the most powerful pattern I knew, one typically reserved for protecting Veil artifacts of immense spiritual significance. I did not expect it to manifest so completely. In essence, I accidentally marked you as something akin to a living temple." Oron stopped walking. "You did what?" "It was necessary to save your life," Vailari defended. "And Ember's by extension. The pattern creates channels for energy to flow freely between bound entities. I did not expect a human physiology to accept it so thoroughly. And what does this mean for me? For us?" Oren gestured toward Ember, who was now demonstrating her color-changing abilities to an impressed young Forest Chira warrior. "I do not know," Vailari admitted. "In our history, such bindings were performed between priestesses and sacred relics, never between living beings of different species. The fact that it worked at all suggests there is something unique about either you or Ember, or perhaps both." "Great," Oren muttered. "More complications." As night fell, the forest clan established camp in a small clearing dominated by a massive tree stump that had been hollowed out and converted into a shelter. Inside, bioluminescent fungi provided soft light, and sleeping pallets made from woven fibers covered the floor. Sylvan invited them to share the evening meal, a stew made from forest roots and what appeared to be some kind of meat, though Oren thought it best not to ask its origin. The Forest Chira ate in ritual fashion, each taking a small portion and offering words of gratitude to the forest before consuming it. After the meal, as Ember dozed beside the small fire, Sylvan approached Oren. "The child speaks highly of you, human," he said, his skin a contemplative blue-green. "She says you faced death without hesitation to save her." Oron shrugged uncomfortably. "It was instinct, nothing more. Instinct reveals true nature more than calculated action," Sylvan replied. "Our legends speak of eternal guardians, beings chosen by the ancestors to protect those with the gift of seeing. In ancient times, before humans came to Aranthia, such guardians were selected from among our own warriors through trials of sacrifice and courage." "I'm no guardian," Oren protested, "just a discharged soldier who happened to be in the right place at the wrong time." Sylvan's skin rippled with what might have been amusement. "The ancestors do not believe in coincidence. Human. Your presence here, bearing the sacred pattern, will be seen as significant by the Central Grove elders. And how will they react? That depends on many factors. The binding itself, the child's testimony, your actions." Sylvan studied him intently. "And the true nature of your heart, which they will test." "I test how?" Oren asked, suddenly wary. "The seeing ritual. It allows the elders to glimpse fragments of a person's past and the truths they carry within." Sylvan's expression grew serious. "It is not pleasant for outsiders. Many find the experience invasive." Oren thought of the memories he carried from the war, the lives he had taken, The comrades he had lost, the moral compromises he had made in the name of victory. The thought of strangers sifting through those memories was deeply unsettling. "Do I have a choice?" "There is always choice," Sylvan replied. "You could leave now, return to the human settlements. The binding would fade eventually, though it would cause the child pain." Oren glanced at Ember, peaceful in sleep, her skin a contented amber glow. The thought of causing her pain was somehow worse than facing the Elder's scrutiny. "I'll stay," he decided, "at least until she's safely with her clan." Sylvan nodded, seeming pleased with this answer. "Rest, then, human. Tomorrow's journey takes us through the deep Zephyra, where the forest's awareness is strongest. You will need your strength, as promised." The next day's travel led them into the heart of the forest, where the trees grew so massive and densely packed that little light penetrated to the forest floor. Here, everything glowed with its own inner light: the fungi, the insects that flitted between trees. Even the bark of the ancient trees themselves seemed to pulse with subtle luminescence. The air was thick with spores and the heady scent of unknown flora. Breathing became an effort, and Oren found himself growing lightheaded. Beside him, Vailari seemed similarly affected, though she masked it better. "The air is rich with psychoactive compounds," she explained when she noticed his struggle. "The forest clan has evolved to process them naturally. But for outsiders, they can induce altered states of consciousness." "You might have mentioned that earlier," Oren muttered, trying to focus on the path ahead as it seemed to shift and waver before his eyes. "Knowledge gained through experience embeds more deeply than that which is merely told." Sylvan called back, his skin rippling with what was definitely amusement this time. Ember, interestingly, seemed unaffected. She moved through the deep Zephyra with the same ease as the forest clan, her skin now a deep, harmonious green that matched the surrounding foliage perfectly. "I like it here," she told Oren, taking his hand as he stumbled slightly. "It sings in my blood." As the day progressed, the hallucinations intensified. The trees seemed to whisper in voices just beyond comprehension. Shadows moved independently of their casters. Once, Oren was certain he saw his old military unit walking alongside him, including comrades long dead. "The forest tests you," Vailari murmured when she found him staring at empty air. "It shows what lies buried in your consciousness." "Convenient explanation for drugging us," Oren replied, though without real anger. There was something almost cleansing about facing these apparitions, if the forest was forcing him to acknowledge aspects of himself he had long suppressed. By nightfall, they reached what Sylvan called the Dreaming Pools, a series of small, mirror-like bodies of water that reflected not the trees above but impossible vistas. Alien skies, ancient cities, cosmic phenomena. Here we rest before the final approach to the central grove," Sylvan announced. "The waters purify both body and spirit. It is traditional to immerse oneself before meeting the elders." The forest clan dispersed to various pools, disrobing without self-consciousness and entering the waters. Ember tugged at Oron's hand, leading him toward a smaller pool somewhat removed from the others. "This one is for us," she said with childish certainty. "It shows the path of guardians." Oron glanced at Vailari, who nodded encouragingly. "The ritual is important to them," she said. "And the waters do have remarkable properties. I have studied samples in the temple laboratories." With a resigned sigh, Oren followed Ember's lead. The water was unexpectedly warm, enveloping him like liquid silk. As he submerged fully, the forest around him seemed to fade away, replaced by a vast, star-filled void. Yet he felt no fear, only a profound sense of connection to Ember, to the forest, to something larger than himself. Within this void, shapes began to form, ghostly apparitions that he somehow knew were the ancestors Sylvan had mentioned. They circled him, studying, judging, their multifaceted eyes reflecting starlight. One approached more closely than the others, a female Chira with skin that shifted through all the colors Auron had seen Ember display, but with an intensity that suggested immense power. "I, Guardian," she addressed him, her voice resonating directly in his mind. "You bear our mark unwittingly, yet carry it with honor." "Who are you?" Auron tried to ask, though no sound emerged in this strange space. "I am Lysra, first seer of the Central Grove, 7 generations past. The child you protect carries my bloodline." The apparition gestured, and Auron saw Ember floating nearby in her own vision quest, her expression one of wonder. "She has great potential, greater than any seer born since my time. I'm just trying to get her home safely," Auron protested. "Safety is but the beginning. She will need guidance, protection, understanding as her gifts manifest fully." Lysra studied him intently. "You bear wounds deeper than flesh, soldier of stars, yet in your brokenness lies your strength. The empty vessel can be filled with new purpose." Before Auron could respond, the vision shifted. He saw Ember grown to adulthood, her powers fully realized, standing between warring factions as a mediator. He saw himself at her side, older but steadfast, the silver scars on his chest now elaborate markings that extended across his entire upper body. "This is one possible future," Lysra's voice explained. "One where the binding between you deepens rather than fades. There are others." The vision changed again, showing Ember alone, her skin a morning gray, performing rituals before an altar that somehow Auron knew contained his ashes. "And this is a future where you choose to sever the bond," Lysra continued. "Where you return to the emptiness you carried when first you came to our world." "And these are manipulations," Auron managed to project into the void. "Emotional leverage to ensure I protect her." Lysra's form rippled with something like laughter. "You think like a soldier, assessing for tactical advantage. Yet consider, if we wished merely to ensure her protection, would we not show you only the second vision? Would we not convince you that severing the bond meant her destruction rather than merely her grief?" It was a fair point. Auron felt his skepticism waver. "I offer not certainty but possibility." Lysra concluded, "The choice remains yours, as it should. But know this, the pattern you bear has not been seen since my time. When the last eternal guardian fell protecting our people from the great burning, its appearance now, on a human no less, suggests destiny at work." With that, the apparition faded, and Auron found himself back in the dreaming pool, gasping for air as if he had been underwater for minutes rather than seconds. Beside him, Ember surfaced as well, her skin glowing with an inner light that illuminated the water around them. "Did you see them?" she asked excitedly. "The ancestors, they spoke to me about you." Auron nodded, still processing the vision. "What did they tell you?" Ember's expression grew serious beyond her years. "That you are meant to be my guardian, that together we will bridge worlds." Her skin shifted to a determined gold. "I told them I already knew that." Later, as they sat by the communal fire drying off, Vailari approached. Her typically composed demeanor seemed shaken, her eyes wide with what might have been awe. "The ancestors spoke to you," she said. "It wasn't a question." "Some kind of hallucinogenic effect from the water," Auron suggested, though he didn't entirely believe it himself. "No. The waters amplify existing connections, but they cannot create what is not there." Vailari sat beside him, her voice lowered. "In all my studies of Kyra culture, I have never heard of the ancestors appearing to an outsider. It is unprecedented. That word keeps coming up, Oren noted dryly, because what is happening is beyond established parameters. Vailari's voice held a hint of frustration. The ritual I performed should not have created such a profound bond. The ancestors should not speak to a human, yet both have occurred. It suggests forces at work beyond my understanding. Or simple coincidence. Right place, right time, right biochemistry. Vailari shook her head. You comfort yourself with rationalization, Federation soldier. But I saw your face when you emerged from the pool. Whatever you experienced was more than hallucination. Before Oren could respond, a commotion erupted at the edge of the camp. Forest clan warriors rushed to defensive positions, their staffs charged and ready. Sylvan appeared at Oren's side, his skin a tense orange red. Intruders approach, he said grimly. Human technology, many of them. Oren felt a cold certainty settle in his gut. Korath. How? We covered our trail. Vailari looked stricken. Tracking implant, Oren realized suddenly. Standard Federation procedure for all military personnel. Deactivated upon discharge, but not removed. He touched the base of his skull where the small device had been implanted years ago. If Korath has access to Federation tracking frequencies, he could follow you anywhere. Vailari finished, her expression hardening. You led him straight to us. Not intentionally, Oren protested, though the guilt hit him like a physical blow. His carelessness might have endangered not just Ember, but the entire Forest clan. Sylvan's skin shifted to a determined crimson. Blame serves no purpose now. We must prepare to defend or flee. He turned to Oren. Can the device be removed? Not without proper medical equipment. Oren replied, but maybe. An idea formed. Vailari, your energy manipulation, can you create interference? Scramble the signal somehow? The priestess considered this. Possibly. The Veil disciplines include techniques for disrupting energy patterns. But I would need to maintain constant focus, and even then, I cannot guarantee success. It's worth trying, Oren decided. How close are we to the central grove? Half a day's journey, Sylvan answered. But the direct path would expose us to the intruders. Oren considered their options. The Forest clan warriors were formidable, but they were armed with energy staffs against Korath's pulse rifles and likely heavier weaponry. A direct confrontation would result in casualties they couldn't afford. Is there another route, less direct but more concealed? Sylvan's expression grew grave. There is the path of trials. It leads through the most ancient part of the forest, where the guardians are most active. Few attempt it, and fewer succeed. But it would avoid Korath's forces? Yes, they would not dare follow. The forest protects its own in that place. Oren looked to Vailari, who nodded slightly. The path of trials is mentioned in our oldest texts. It is said to test the worthiness of those who seek the heart of the forest. Then that's our route, Oren decided. He turned to Ember, who had been listening silently, her skin a worried pale blue. Are you brave enough for a difficult path, little one? To his surprise, Ember's skin shifted to a determined gold. I'm not afraid if you're with me, she said simply. The decision made. They moved quickly. Vailari began the energy manipulation to disrupt Oren's tracking implant, her hands glowing with blue-white power as she placed them at the base of his skull. The sensation was uncomfortable, like static electricity crawling under his skin, but he endured it without complaint. The Forest clan warriors prepared defensive positions to buy them time, while Sylvan gathered a small escort to guide them on the path of trials. Once you enter the ancient heart, you must follow the path to its end, he warned. To turn back is to invite the forest's wrath. Understood, Oren replied, checking the pulse pistol one last time. He doubted it would be effective against whatever guardians awaited them, but its familiar weight was comforting nonetheless. As they prepared to depart, the sounds of approaching hoverbikes grew louder. Ember pressed close to Oren's side, her skin shifting between fearful blue and angry red. "They're coming for me," she whispered. Oren knelt to meet her eyes. "They won't get you," he promised. "Not while I'm breathing." It was the kind of dramatic vow he would have scoffed at during his military days. Too absolute, too emotional. Yet he meant every word, he realized. Somewhere between taking that pulse bolt and now, this child had become more than a responsibility. She had become a purpose. They slipped away from the camp as the first exchange of energy fire lit up the night behind them. Sylvan led them along a barely visible path that seemed to disappear and reappear with each step. The forest grew older here, the trees impossibly massive, their bark twisted into faces and forms that seemed to watch their passage. Vailari maintained her disruption technique, though Oren could see the strain it placed on her. Sweat beaded on her forehead, and her breathing grew labored as they traveled deeper into what Sylvan called the ancient heart. The air grew thick with luminescent spores that swirled in patterns too deliberate to be random. Sounds emerged from the darkness, whispers, chimes. Occasionally what sounded like distant singing in a language Oren didn't recognize but somehow understood was incredibly old. "The Guardians watch us," Sylvan murmured, his skin a reverent deep purple. "They decide whether we are worthy to pass." As if in response to his words, the path ahead suddenly vanished, replaced by a wall of vegetation so dense it appeared solid. Sylvan stopped, his expression troubled. "The first trial," he explained. "The path asks for sacrifice, a token of sincere intent." "What kind of sacrifice?" Oren asked warily. "It's something of value to each traveler. The forest perceives true worth, not material value. One by one." They approached the vegetation wall. Sylvan went first, removing a crystal pendant from around his neck, clearly an item of personal significance, and placing it against the wall. The vegetation parted just enough to allow him to step through before closing behind him. The forest clan escorts followed, each offering something different: a weapon, a lock of hair, in one case what appeared to be a preserved flower. Each passed through successfully. Vailari hesitated, then removed an ornate silver ring bearing the symbol of her order. "My initiation ring," she explained. "Symbol of my commitment to the vile disciplines." The wall accepted her offering, parting to allow her passage. Ember approached next, her small face solemn. From within her robes, she produced a tiny carving of what appeared to be a Kyra adult, perhaps a parent or relative. She kissed it once before pressing it to the wall, which opened for her immediately. Finally, Oren stood alone before the barrier. What did he possess of true value? His military service medals had been left behind long ago. He carried no keepsakes, no mementos of his former life. Then he remembered the one thing he had kept. From a hidden pocket, he withdrew a small, worn holotag bearing the names of his fallen squad members. He had carried it since the ambush that had cost him his leg and his team their lives. It was his reminder, his penance. "This is all I have," he told the forest, feeling slightly foolish for addressing vegetation. "The names of those I failed to save." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, the wall began to part wider than it had for the others, as if in recognition of the weight of his offering. As he stepped through, he felt a strange sensation, as if invisible hands were returning the holotag to him. When he checked his pocket on the other side, the tag was indeed there, but changed. The metal had taken on a faint luminescence, and the names seemed to glow from within. "The forest returned your offering." Sylvan observed with surprise. It is rare. It suggests your sacrifice is ongoing, not completed. Before Oren could ponder this, the ground beneath them trembled. In the distance, they heard the unmistakable sound of energy weapons. The battle between the Forest clan and Korath's forces had escalated. "We must hurry," Sylvan urged. "The second trial awaits." They pressed on, the path growing increasingly surreal. Trees twisted into impossible shapes, creating archways and tunnels that seemed to defy physical laws. Luminescent creatures watched their passage with intelligent eyes. Once, Oren was certain he saw a massive shape moving among the distant trees, something far larger than any forest creature had a right to be. The second trial manifested as a chasm that cut across their path too wide to jump, its bottom lost in darkness. Floating above it were stepping stones of what appeared to be solidified light, each glowing a different color. "The trial of truth," Sylvan explained. "Each must cross alone, stepping only on the colors that reflect their true nature. Step falsely, and the stone will dissolve." "How do we know which colors are ours?" Oren asked. "You don't," Sylvan replied. "When that is the test, when the forest sees your essence and creates the path accordingly. You must trust your instincts." Once again, Sylvan demonstrated, stepping confidently onto stones of green, purple, and deep blue colors that Oren had seen represented in the Pathfinder's skin during moments of contemplation or reverence. He crossed without incident. The Forest Clan warriors followed, each taking different colored paths. One hesitated too long, second-guessing himself, and nearly fell when a stone dissolved beneath him. He managed to leap to the next stone, but the message was clear. Hesitation was as dangerous as choosing falsely. Vailari crossed on stones of silver and indigo colors of her order and her discipline. She moved with the grace of her priestess training, never hesitating. When Ember's turn came, Oren felt a surge of protectiveness. The stones seemed too far apart for her small legs, the consequences of a misstep too severe. But before he could object, she stepped forward with absolute confidence, her skin shifting through a rainbow of colors as she hopped from stone to stone, sometimes landing on colors that hadn't been visible until her approach. She reached the other side with ease, turning back to wave encouragingly at Oren. Now it was his turn. Oren studied the floating stones, seeing no obvious pattern that would indicate which were his. In his military days, he would have analyzed the problem methodically, testing hypotheses and minimizing risk. But those approaches had failed him when it mattered most. Perhaps this was about something else. He closed his eyes, focusing on the sensations within, the steady beat of his heart, the subtle awareness of Ember through their bond, the weight of his experiences both painful and transformative. When he opened his eyes again, certain stones seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. Taking a deep breath, he stepped onto the first, a deep, battle-scarred red. It held. The next stone that called to him was a softer blue, like the color of Ember's skin when she was at peace. Then a resolute gold, the color of her determination. As he continued across, he realized he was following not just his own colors, but those that represented his connection to Ember, their shared experiences, their growing bond. The final stone was unlike the others, a swirling mixture of all colors, constantly shifting and changing. It represented possibility, potential, the future yet to be written. He hesitated only briefly before stepping onto it, feeling it solidify beneath him as he crossed to the other side. "Remarkable," Sylvan murmured as Oren joined them. "You found the path of synthesis very rare, especially for an outsider." Ember beamed at him, her skin a pleased golden yellow. "I told the ancestors you were special," she said proudly. They continued on, the path growing increasingly surreal. Time seemed to flow differently here sometimes, stretching so that seconds felt like hours. Other times compressing so that they seemed to cover impossible distances in moments. The forest itself seemed to be breathing around them, the trees pulsing with internal light in a rhythm that matched their heartbeats. The third and final trial appeared without warning. One moment they were walking along the path. The next they stood before an enormous tree unlike any Auron had seen before. Its trunk was wide enough that 20 people could not have joined hands around it, and it rose so high that its upper branches were lost in the misty canopy above. The bark was not the purple of the other Zephyra trees, but a deep, midnight black etched with glowing silver patterns that Auron recognized with a shock. They matched the scars on his chest. The guardian tree, Sylvan whispered, his skin shifting to a reverent deep blue. The heart of the forest's consciousness. Legend says it grew from the essence of the first Kyra seer, who gave her physical form to become the eternal guardian of her people. Before the tree was a pool of liquid that glowed with the same silver light as the tree's markings. Unlike the dreaming pools, this liquid seemed more substantial, almost metallic in its consistency. The trial of essence, Sylvan explained. The guardian tree asks for proof of your commitment, not a token, as in the first trial, but a demonstration of your true purpose. How do we demonstrate that? Auron asked. Each in your own way, Sylvan replied. The tree will make its requirements known, as if in response to his words. The silver liquid in the pool began to shift and rise, forming shapes that approached each of them. The shapes were indistinct at first, then resolved into mirror images of themselves, silver duplicates that moved and changed to reflect different aspects of their beings. Sylvan's duplicate shifted between warrior and healer, finally settling on the form of a Gaidea pathfinder leading others to safety. He nodded in acceptance of this reflection, and his duplicate dissolved back into the pool. The Forest Clan warriors faced similar trials, each confronting and accepting aspects of themselves both known and hidden. Valerie's duplicate was more challenging. It shifted between priestess and scientist, healer and warrior, finally revealing a form that seemed torn between strict tradition and revolutionary change. Valerie struggled visibly with this reflection before finally acknowledging its truth with a bow of her head. Her duplicate nodded in return before dissolving. Ember's duplicate shifted rapidly through future possibilities, child, adolescent, adult, elder, each form showing increasing power and responsibility. When it finally settled, it displayed a mature Kyra with eyes that held ancient wisdom and skin that glowed with internal light so bright it was almost blinding. Ember reached out with innocent curiosity and touched her duplicate's hand. Both child and duplicate glowed momentarily before the silver form dissolved. Then Auron's duplicate approached. It began as he currently was, then shifted to show him as he had been the Federation soldier, efficient and disciplined. Then it changed again, revealing the broken man he had become after his injuries and discharge. But it didn't stop there. It continued to shift, showing possible futures. Auron as a hardened mercenary, Auron as a bitter recluse, Auron as a leader of others. Finally, it settled on a form that startled him. Auron standing protective beside an adult Ember, his body marked with the same silver patterns as the guardian tree, his eyes reflecting the same ancient wisdom as hers. This Auron was neither soldier nor wanderer, but something new, a bridge between worlds, as Ember had said. Is this what you want from me? Auron asked the duplicate. The silver figure didn't speak, but Auron felt a response nevertheless, not in words, but in sensations. Purpose, belonging, connection, importance. The emptiness he had carried since the war filled with possibility. But there was also cost, the letting go of his old identity, the acceptance of a new path. the responsibility of guiding a power he barely understood. This was no simple guardianship. It was a transformation. "I don't know if I'm capable of this," Orin admitted. The duplicate's expression softened with understanding. It extended its hand, offering not demands but invitation. The choice remained his. Orin thought of Ember, her trust in him, her certainty of their connection. He thought of the emptiness he had carried, the purposelessness that had driven him to wander. He thought of Lysra's visions in the dreaming pool, the alternate future she had shown him. Slowly, he reached out and took the duplicate's hand. The sensation was electric, a surge of energy that traveled from the duplicate into Oron, flowing through his body and concentrating in the ritual scars on his chest. The silver patterns glowed brightly, then expanded, extending across his shoulders and down his arms in intricate designs that matched those on the guardian tree. When it was done, the duplicate dissolved, flowing back into the pool. Orin stood transfixed, feeling somehow both lighter and heavier, unburdened of his past, yet weighted with new purpose. Ember rushed to his side, her skin a joyful gold as she touched the new markings on his arms. "Now you're really my guardian," she said with childish satisfaction. Before Orin could respond, the ground shook violently. From far behind them came the sounds of destruction energy weapons more powerful than those they had heard before. "Korath has breached the forest's outer defenses," Sylvan said grimly. "He brings greater weapons than we anticipated," as if in response to the threat. The guardian tree's trunk began to shift and open, revealing a passageway leading into its heart. Soft silver light emanated from within, beckoning them. "The way to the central grove," Sylvan explained. "The tree offers direct passage in times of great need." They hurried inside, the passage sealing behind them as soon as the last warrior entered. Within the tree was a chamber of impossible proportions, far larger than the tree's exterior should have allowed. The walls pulsed with the same silver light as the markings, and the air hummed with energy that Oron could feel resonating with his new patterns. At the center of the chamber was a platform surrounded by smaller trees that seemed to have grown inside the greater one. Upon this platform stood a group of Chira unlike any they had yet encountered, taller, more ethereal, their skin shifting through colors so subtle and complex they defied description. Their eyes held the wisdom of centuries, and they wore robes adorned with patterns similar to those now marking Oron's skin. "The elders of the central grove," Sylvan announced, his skin shifting to a deep, respectful purple. "We seek sanctuary from those who would harm the light child." The eldest of the group, a female Kyra whose skin had settled into a luminescent silver white, stepped forward. Her multifaceted eyes widened at the sight of Ember, then fixed on Orin with penetrating intensity. "The pattern bearer comes," she said in a voice that seemed to echo from the tree itself. "Lysra's prophecy manifests at last." Murmurs spread through the gathered elders. Some looked pleased, others troubled, all intrigued. "Great Elder Tichi," Sylvan addressed her with reverence. "They have passed the trials of the ancient heart. The forest itself has marked the human as guardian." Elder Tiki approached Oron, studying the silver patterns on his skin with careful scrutiny. "So it has," she acknowledged. "Yet tradition demands the seeing before acceptance." She turned to Ember, her expression softening. "Child of Lysra's line, you have journeyed far and faced much. Are you prepared to claim your place among the seers of the central grove?" Ember looked up at Oron, then back to the elder. "Only if my guardian comes too," she said with surprising firmness. "We're connected." "So I see." Elder Tichi's skin rippled with what might have been amusement. "The bond is unusually strong. Vailari of the temple, you have much to explain about this ritual you performed." Valari stepped forward, bowing deeply. Great Elder, I acted to save both lives in a moment of crisis. I did not anticipate the strength of the connection that would form. A few outcomes are anticipated when old powers are invoked in new ways. Elder Tichy observed, Yet the forest has accepted both the bond and the bearer. She turned back to Oren. Will you submit to the seeing human? To allow the elders to witness your true nature? Oren glanced at Sylvan, who nodded encouragingly. I will, he agreed, though not without apprehension. Then let us begin before our enemies draw closer. Elder Tichy gestured, and the platform beneath them began to rise, carrying them up through the heart of the guardian tree. They emerged into an enormous chamber high in the tree's canopy. Here, the branches had grown together to form a cathedral-like space, with windows of translucent amber resin that filtered the sunlight into golden beams. In the center of the chamber was a circular pool of the same silver liquid they had encountered below. The elders formed a circle around the pool, their skins shifting in unison to a deep, meditative blue. Elder Tichy gestured for Oron to enter the pool. The seeing allows no deception, no hidden motives, she warned. All that you are will be revealed to the council. Taking a deep breath, Oren stepped into the pool. The liquid was surprisingly warm, enveloping him up to his waist. As soon as he was fully immersed, the silver patterns on his skin began to glow in response to the liquid, creating a network of light that extended from his body into the pool itself. Elder Tichy and the other elders placed their hands into the pool, their skins shifting rapidly as they connected with Oren's consciousness. He felt their presence, gentle but insistent, moving through his memories like pages in a book. They saw his childhood on a Federation colony world, his military training and service, the battles he had fought and the comrades he had lost. They witnessed the ambush that had cost him his leg, the long recovery, the honorable discharge that had felt more like abandonment. They saw his aimless wandering, the emptiness that had driven him to Aranthia, and finally, the moment of decision when he had thrown himself between a pulse rifle and a child he didn't know. Through it all, Oren remained conscious, a witness to his own life as others experienced it. He felt their reactions: approval, concern, occasional surprise or respect. Most importantly, he felt no judgment for his past actions, only a deep curiosity about what had led him to this moment. When they reached the recent events, the ritual binding, the journey through the forest, the trials and his acceptance of the guardian role, he sensed a shift in their collective consciousness. A decision was being made. Finally, they withdrew from his mind, their hands leaving the pool. Elder Tichy's skin had settled into a thoughtful silver gold. We have seen, she announced. Oren Saul, former soldier of the Federation, now bears the pattern of the Eternal Guardian, not by chance or accident, but by the convergence of choice and destiny. She turned to the other elders. What say the council? One by one, the elders' skins shifted to a uniform gold, the color of acceptance. It is decided, Elder Tichy declared. The bond will be honored. The human shall serve as guardian to the child Ember, last of Lysra's bloodline and future seer of the Central Grove. Relief washed over Oren as he stepped from the pool. Ember rushed to him, her skin a joyful rainbow of colors as she embraced him. The silver patterns on his skin responded to her touch, glowing more brightly where they made contact. I knew they would accept you, she whispered. The ancestors told me. Their moment of triumph was short-lived. A tremendous explosion shook the tree, causing branches to crack and amber windows to shatter. Through the new openings, they could see hovercraft approaching rapidly, each bearing armed soldiers in rebel insignia. Korath, Vailari breathed, her expression grim. He's found us despite our precautions. Elder Ticky's skin shifted to a warning red. The sanctuary is breached. We must protect the seers and the sacred knowledge. She turned to the other elders. Activate the defenses. Evacuate the young ones to the deeper groves. As the elders hurried to obey, she addressed Auron directly. Guardian, your first test comes sooner than expected. The rebel leader seeks the child for her abilities. He must not succeed. Auron nodded, feeling a strange calm settle over him. The silver patterns on his skin pulsed with energy, and he sensed Ember's fear through their bond, not paralyzing terror but a determined apprehension. What are the tree's defenses? He asked, military training reasserting itself as he assessed their tactical position. The guardian tree can channel the forest's energy to repel invaders, but its power is not infinite, and it will not harm sentient beings directly, only defend against aggression. Elder Tichy gestured toward the silver liquid. The essence pool can be used to enhance the tree's defenses, but it requires focused will to direct. My priestesses are trained in energy focusing, Vailari offered. We can assist. Sylvan and his warriors stepped forward as well. We will defend the approaches, the Pathfinder declared. No rebel reaches the chamber without facing us first. Auron considered their options. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they had home field advantage and abilities Korath couldn't anticipate. Most importantly, they had a clear purpose: protect Ember and the other young Kyra at all costs. We need to split their forces, he decided. Make them fight on multiple fronts while we evacuate the vulnerable. He turned to Vailari. Can you create illusions with your energy manipulation? Make them think Ember is somewhere she's not? The priestess nodded. With the tree's power augmenting my own, yes. I can project an image that will register on their scanners as a Kyra life sign. Good. Set up decoys to draw off some of their forces. Auron turned to Sylvan. Your warriors know the tree's passages. Have them lead ambush and run tactics to slow the main force. The Pathfinder's skin shifted to a battle-ready crimson. It shall be done. Elder Tichy, Auron continued. You said the tree defends against aggression. Can it distinguish friend from foe? It responds to intent more than identity, she confirmed. Those who enter with violence in their hearts trigger its defenses automatically. Then let's make sure Korath and his people have nothing but violence in mind when they reach us. Auron knelt before Ember, meeting her multifaceted eyes. I need to go with Sylvan to help organize the defense. You'll stay here with Elder Tichy and the other children. Is that okay? Ember's skin shifted to a determined gold, though Auron could sense her fear through their bond. I understand, but be careful. If you get hurt. I'll feel it, Auron finished for her, understanding now how the bond worked in both directions. I'll be careful, I promise. She surprised him by wrapping her small arms around his neck, her skin warming to a gentle amber. The ancestors will protect you, she whispered. And I'll protect you, he replied, returning the embrace before rising to his feet. The next hour was a blur of preparation. Vailari and her priestesses positioned themselves at strategic points throughout the tree, creating illusory signatures that would register as Kyra life signs on rebel scanners. Sylvan and his warriors disappeared into the labyrinthine passages of the tree, preparing ambush points and evacuation routes. Elder Tichy led the young Kyra, including Ember, to a chamber deep within the tree's heart, a last refuge should all other defenses fail. Auron found himself naturally assuming command, his military training reasserting itself as he coordinated their defense. The silver patterns on his skin seemed to enhance his awareness of the tree's layout, allowing him to visualize positions and movements with unusual clarity. Through it all, He maintained a constant awareness of Ember through their Bonda reassuring presence at the back of his mind, frightened but trusting in his protection. The first attack came suddenly. Explosive charges detonated against the tree's outer bark, creating breaches for rebel troops to enter. Oran felt the tree's response through his silver markings, a surge of defensive energy that slowed the invaders but couldn't stop them entirely. "They're inside," Sylvan reported via a communication crystal. "Multiple entry points, at least 30 fighters, heavily armed." "A fall back to the secondary positions," Oran ordered. "Draw them deeper into the tree, let the passageways confuse them and split their forces." The strategy worked initially. Korath's rebels, unfamiliar with the tree's interior, found themselves separated and disoriented by passages that seemed to shift and change. Sylvan's warriors struck from concealment, eliminating isolated fighters before retreating deeper into the tree. But Korath himself proved more adaptable than expected. His voice echoed through communication devices captured from fallen rebels. "A focus on the central chamber," he commanded his forces. "Ignore the decoys. Our scans show the strongest energy signatures at the tree's heart. That's where the child will be." Oran realized with growing alarm that Korath had somehow pierced Vailari's illusions. The rebel leader was converging his remaining forces for a direct assault on their last defensive position. The approach to the chamber where Ember and the other children were hidden. There was no time for subtlety now. Oran gathered the remaining defenders, a handful of Forest Clan warriors. Vailari, and 2 of her priestesses at the final choke point before the children's chamber. "This is where we hold," he told them, checking the pulse pistol one last time. "No matter what." Vailari's hands glowed with accumulated energy. "The tree will fight with us," she said. "I can feel its rage at the invasion." Indeed, the very wood around them seemed to pulse with anger. The silver patterns that marked the walls intensified, and the air grew thick with charged particles that made Oran's new markings tingle and glow. They didn't have to wait long. Korath's forces arrived in a coordinated rush, using portable shields to deflect energy attacks from Sylvan's warriors. At their head was Korath himself, a tall, cybernetically enhanced human whose left eye glowed with the same red light as the targeting systems on his soldiers' weapons. "The Federation deserter," Korath called when he spotted Oran. "I thought we'd meet again. You've led me on quite a chase." "It ends here, Korath," Oran replied, raising the pulse pistol. "You're not getting past us." Korath smiled, the expression never reaching his organic eye. "Always the hero, even after the Federation discarded you. Do you think playing guardian to an alien child will give you the purpose you lost?" The words struck uncomfortably close to Oran's initial motivations. But that had been before the bond, before the trials, before he understood what was truly at stake. "I know what you want her for," Oran said, keeping his aim steady. "It won't work. The Kyra abilities can't be weaponized the way you think." "Perhaps," Korath conceded. "But the potential is worth investigating. Think of it. Sol soldiers who feel no fear, who heal from wounds in minutes, who can induce terror in their enemies with a thought. The Federation would pay handsomely for such advantages." "The Federation signed the peace treaty," Oran reminded him. "The war is over." Korath's cybernetic eye pulsed brighter. "Treaties are made to be broken when advantage presents itself. You were a soldier long enough to know that." It was true, and the knowledge had contributed to Oran's disillusionment after his discharge. But that didn't make Korath's ambitions any less abhorrent. "Last chance to walk away," Oran warned, though he knew the rebel leader would never retreat. Korath's response was to raise his weapon, a modified pulse rifle far more powerful than Oran's pistol. "I could say the same to you. Stand aside and you might live to see what the new order looks like." Oren felt a surge of energy through his silver markings, as if the tree itself were offering its power. Without conscious thought, he channeled it into a barrier between the rebels and their position, a wall of shimmering silver energy that solidified into a shield. Korath fired. The pulse bolt struck Oron's energy shield and dissipated, absorbed into the silver patterns. The rebel leader's organic eye widened in genuine surprise. "Interesting," he murmured. "You've acquired new tricks since our last encounter." Before Oren could respond, Korath made a sharp gesture to his troops. "Overwhelming force," he commanded. "All weapons. Maximum output." The rebels opened fire simultaneously, their combined energy weapons creating a storm of destructive power that hammered against Oron's shield. He felt each impact as if it were striking his own body, the silver markings burning with the effort of maintaining the barrier. Vailari moved to his side, adding her energy manipulation to his defense. "The tree is with us," she reminded him. "Draw from it, not just from yourself." Oron nodded, shifting his focus from pushing outward with his own strength to opening himself to the energy flowing through the tree. The sensation was extraordinary, like tapping into a vast reservoir of power that had always been there, just beyond his awareness. The shield strengthened, now glowing with a blinding silver light. The rebels' weapons began to overheat, some failing entirely as their energy was absorbed and redirected. Korath, seeing his advantage slipping away, reached into his armor and withdrew a small, ominous device. "Enough games," he snarled. "If I can't have the child, no one will. This resonance bomb will shatter the tree's molecular structure from within. You have 1 minute to bring me the Chira seer, or we all die together." Oron recognized the device from his military training, a forbidden weapon that had been outlawed by both sides during the war due to its devastating ecological impact. Once activated, it would trigger a chain reaction in any organic material within its radius, essentially turning the guardian tree against itself. "He's bluffing," Vailari whispered. "Such a device would kill him too." "No," Oren replied grimly. "He's had extensive cybernetic modifications. He'd survive long enough to escape, even if his troops don't." Through their bond, Oren felt a sudden spike of determination from Ember. Before he could react, a small voice called from behind them. "I'm here." To Oren's horror, Ember stepped into view, having somehow slipped away from Elder Tichy and the other children. Her skin glowed with a defiant gold as she faced Korath. "Ember, no." Oren moved to pull her back, but she stepped forward with surprising confidence. "You want me because I can change how people feel," she said to Korath, her voice steady despite her obvious fear. "I'll show you," before anyone could stop her. Ember's skin began to shift through a rapid sequence of colors, not the normal emotional indicators of her species, but something more deliberate, more focused. The colors pulsed in hypnotic patterns that drew all eyes to her. Korath stared, momentarily transfixed by the display. His finger hovered over the detonator switch as Ember's colors intensified, now emanating a visible aura that extended toward the rebel leader. Oron felt the effect through their bond, a powerful projection of emotion focused entirely on Korath. Not fear or anger as he might have expected, but something far more devastating to a man like the rebel leader. Doubt. Ember was somehow amplifying and projecting Korath's own hidden uncertainties about his mission, his motivations, his likelihood of success. The rebel leader's hand began to tremble as the emotional onslaught intensified. What are you doing to me?" he demanded, his voice losing its commanding edge. "Showing you yourself," Ember replied, her skin now a penetrating deep blue that seemed to look through Korath rather than at him. "The part you hide away." The rebel leader's cybernetic eye flickered erratically as he fought against the influence. "Stop this!" he commanded, raising his weapon with visible effort. Oren reacted instantly, dropping the energy shield and lunging forward. He tackled Korath just as the rebel leader fired, the pulse bolt going wide and striking one of his own troops instead. They crashed to the floor, the resonance bomb skittering away across the smooth wood surface. Vailari dove for the device, her priestess training giving her the speed to reach it before Korath's stunned troops could react. She deactivated it with practiced hands, the ominous countdown freezing with seconds to spare. Meanwhile, Oren grappled with Korath. The two men locked in a desperate struggle. The rebel leader's cybernetic enhancements gave him unnatural strength. But Oren had the power of the tree flowing through his silver markings. Each time Korath seemed about to gain the advantage, a surge of energy from the patterns would push him back. "You don't understand what you're interfering with," Korath hissed, his organic eye wild with frustration. The potential of the Kyra could end conflicts before they begin. Total emotional control over enemy forces, fear, confusion, despair, all at our command. "At the cost of enslaving a species," Oren replied, blocking a strike aimed at his throat. "Some prices are too high, even for peace," he says, the man who bombed civilian settlements during the Proxima campaign. Korath sneered. "I read your service record, Saul. Your hands aren't clean either." The accusation struck home. Oren had indeed participated in that campaign, following orders he'd later come to question. But that had been before he understood the true cost of such decisions. "You're right," Oren acknowledged, surprising Korath momentarily. "I've made mistakes, followed orders I shouldn't have, but that's why I'm stopping you now." With a final surge of energy through his silver markings, Oren pinned Korath against the wall of the chamber. The tree itself seemed to respond, branches shifting to encircle the rebel leader's arms and legs, holding him immobile. "It's over," Oren told him, stepping back as the living restraints tightened. "Your forces are defeated. The Kyra remain free." Korath struggled against his bonds, his cybernetic eye flaring with impotent rage. "The Federation will come for them eventually," he spat. "What I attempted alone, they'll do with fleets and armies when they learn of the potential. Then we'll be ready," Oren replied, turning away from the captured rebel. His attention was focused entirely on Ember, who stood trembling from the effort of her emotional projection. Her skin had faded to an exhausted pale blue, and she swayed slightly on her feet. Oren crossed the chamber in 3 long strides, kneeling to gather her into his arms. "That was incredibly brave," he told her softly, "and incredibly foolish." "I had to help," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I felt your fear for me. I couldn't hide while you were in danger." Through their bond, Oren sensed the depth of her concern, a protective instinct that mirrored his own. The connection between them had grown stronger than he'd realized, flowing in both directions. Vailari approached, the deactivated resonance bomb secured in a containment field. She displayed abilities far beyond her years, the priestess observed. The emotional projection of a mature seer, focused with remarkable precision. "I just showed him what was already there," Ember explained, her color strengthening slightly as she recovered. "Everyone has doubts. His were just buried deeper than most." Elder Tiki emerged from the children's chamber, her expression a mixture of concern and pride as she surveyed the aftermath of the confrontation. The remaining rebels had been subdued by Sylvan's warriors, their weapons confiscated. "The sanctuary is secured," the elder announced. "Though the guardian tree has suffered wounds that will take time to heal." Oren could feel the tree's injury through his silver markings, places where the rebels' weapons had damaged its living tissue. but he also sensed its resilience, its determination to recover and grow stronger. "What happens to Korath?" he asked, nodding toward the captured rebel leader. "Justice among the Kyra is not punitive but restorative," Elder Tichy explained. "He will be held until representatives of the Federation can retrieve him. His crimes violate the peace treaty and will be addressed accordingly." Korath laughed bitterly from his restraints. "The Federation will be more interested in my research than my punishment," he predicted. "When they learn what the Kyra can do, they already know." Vailari interrupted. The Veil Order shared limited information about Kyra abilities during the peace negotiations. The Federation chose respect over exploitation. Not all humans share your views. Korath. The rebel leader fell silent, though his cybernetic eye continued to pulse with defiant energy. Elder Tichy turned to Oron, her skin shifting to a formal purple. "Guardian, you have fulfilled your first duty admirably. The sanctuary remains inviolate, and the children are safe." She gestured to the gathered elders who had emerged from various hiding places throughout the tree. "The council would speak with you now about your position among us." Oron hesitated, looking down at Ember, who still rested in his arms. "My position? The pattern of the Eternal Guardian carries both privileges and responsibilities." Elder Tichy explained. "Traditionally, the bearer serves as protector not just to a single seer, but to the Kyra people as a whole. It is a sacred role, one that has remained unfilled for 7 generations. Oron felt a weight of expectation settling on his shoulders. He had accepted the bond with Ember, had embraced his role as her personal guardian. But this becoming a figurehead for an entire species was far beyond what he had anticipated. "I'm not sure I'm qualified for that," he admitted. "I'm still learning what these markings mean, what I can do with them." "Which is precisely why you are qualified," Elder Tichy replied with surprising gentleness. "The greatest danger in power is believing one fully understands it. Your humility honors the pattern you bear." The gathered elders murmured agreement, their skins shifting to harmonious shades of approval. "Come," Elder Tichy continued. "We have much to discuss, and the day grows late. The tree will heal, the prisoners will be secured, and the future of our peoples will unfold according to the wisdom we bring to it." As they made their way deeper into the guardian tree, toward chambers reserved for the most sacred Kyra rituals, Oron felt a profound sense of transition. The emptiness that had driven him since his discharge was gone, replaced by purpose and connection. The silver patterns on his skin no longer felt foreign but integral to his being, a physical manifestation of the bond he shared with Ember and, by extension, with the Kyra themselves. The ceremonies that followed were elaborate and, to Oron, largely incomprehensible. The elders spoke in the ancient Kyra language, their skins shifting through patterns so complex they seemed to tell stories in themselves. Ember remained by his side throughout, occasionally whispering translations of particularly important passages. At the culmination, Elder Tichy presented him with a crystalline staff similar to those carried by the Forest Clan warriors, but adorned with silver inlays that matched his skin patterns. "The Staff of Witnessing," she explained. "It marks you as voice and protector of the Kyra among other peoples. When you speak with this in hand, you speak with the authority of the Central Grove." Oron accepted the staff with appropriate solemnity, feeling it resonate with the silver patterns on his skin. "I will honor this responsibility," he promised, though privately he wondered how a former Federation soldier would be received as ambassador for a species that had suffered under human expansion. As if sensing his doubts, Vailari approached after the ceremony. "Your concern does you credit," she said. "But consider, Who better to bridge these worlds than one who has lived in both? Your military experience gives you credibility with the Federation. Your bond with Ember gives you legitimacy among the Kyra. You stand at the intersection of possibilities. Assuming the Federation acknowledges either, Oren pointed out, they're not known for respecting mystical bonds or ancient patterns. Perhaps not, Vailari conceded. But they do respect power and advantage. The alliance you represent, humans, Chira, and Vile working in harmony offers diplomatic advantages they would be foolish to dismiss. Before Oren could respond, Ember tugged at his hand, her skin a curious mixture of excitement and apprehension. The ancestors want to show you something, she said. In the dreaming chamber. Curious. Oren allowed her to lead him to a small room deep within the tree, where a pool similar to the dreaming pools they had encountered earlier reflected impossible vistas. This one, however, seemed to show not distant places but potential future-shifting, overlapping possibilities that changed with each ripple across its surface. Ember knelt beside the pool, her skin taking on the reflective quality of the liquid. Look, she instructed, placing her small hand on the surface. Oren knelt beside her and gazed into the pool. The liquid shifted and cleared, revealing a vision of Ember grown to adulthood, standing before a council chamber that Oren recognized as the Federation High Command. Beside her stood an older version of himself, silver patterns now covering most of his visible skin, as he addressed the assembled officials with quiet authority. The scene shifted to show a new settlement where humans and Chira worked side by side, their technologies and abilities complementing each other. Another shift revealed Vailari teaching a class of mixed species, sharing Vael energy manipulation techniques with carefully selected students. Possibilities, Ember explained. Not certainties. The ancestors say the future branches with each choice we make. And these are good branches? Oren asked, still transfixed by the images. The best they can see from here, Ember confirmed, her skin a hopeful gold. But they need us to walk the path, to make the hard choices when they come. Oren nodded, understanding the responsibility that had been placed upon them both. Ember would grow into her role as seer, guiding her people with visions of possible futures. And he would stand beside her, the eternal guardian, protecting not just her physical safety but the potential she represented. Then we'll walk it together, he promised, taking her small hand in his. The final ceremony took place at dawn, on a platform high in the guardian tree's canopy. The first light of Aranthia's sun filtered through the amber resin windows, casting golden illumination across the assembled Chira, Vael priestesses, and the handful of humans who had been part of their journey. Elder Tichi stood before them, her skin shifting through formal patterns as she addressed the gathering. The pattern of the eternal guardian returns to us in a time of transition, she declared. Not by chance, but by the convergence of choice, sacrifice, and necessity. Oren Sol stands now between worlds no longer fully human, not quite Chira, but a bridge between peoples who have too long viewed each other with suspicion. She turned to Oren, who stood with the staff of witnessing in one hand and Ember's small fingers clasped in the other. Will you accept this role, with all its burdens and privileges? Will you speak for those who cannot speak for themselves? Stand between the innocent and those who would exploit them, and honor the ancient patterns that now mark your flesh? Oren felt the weight of the moment, the expectation of the Chira, the skepticism of some, the hope of others. He thought of the emptiness that had driven him to Aranthia, the purposelessness that had followed his discharge from the Federation. He thought of the moment when instinct had propelled him in front of a pulse rifle to save a child he didn't know. Most of all, he thought of Ember, her trust in him, her certainty that they were meant to walk this path together. I will, he answered, the silver patterns on his skin glowing with the sincerity of his commitment. Elder Tiki nodded in satisfaction. Then it is witnessed and sealed. The guardian walks among us once more. The assembled Chaira raised their voices in a harmonic chant that seemed to resonate with the very wood of the tree around them. The silver patterns throughout the chamber on the walls, the floor, and Oron's skin pulsed in rhythm with the sound. Oron felt a final surge of energy through the patterns, a confirmation and strengthening of the bond he shared with Ember and, by extension, with all the Chaira. The emptiness within him was gone completely now, filled with purpose and connection. As the ceremony concluded and the gathering began to disperse, Vailari approached him one last time. "So, Federation soldier," she said with the ghost of a smile, "have you found what you were searching for?" Oron looked down at Ember, whose skin glowed with a contented amber in the morning light, then out across the vast expanse of the Zephyra forest visible through the amber windows. Beyond lay Hilaris, the Federation outposts, and eventually, the stars themselves, all places where his new role would be tested and defined. "I wasn't searching for anything specific," he replied honestly. "Just a reason to keep going." And now, Oron felt the silver patterns warm against his skin, a constant reminder of the connection he had accepted and the responsibility he had embraced. "Now I have too many reasons to count," he said simply. Ember's skin shifted to a knowing violet as she looked up at him. "The ancestors say that's how it should be," she told him with childish wisdom. "One purpose can be lost. Many purposes together create a path." As they stood together on the bridge between worlds, bathed in the golden light of a new day, Oron reflected that perhaps the greatest wounds, those of the spirit rather than the flesh, healed not through time alone but through connection to something larger than oneself. He had taken a bullet metaphorically and literally for an alien child, and now her clan treated him like a god, not through blind worship, but through the recognition that sometimes the most divine act is simply placing oneself between harm and the innocent, without expectation of reward. It wasn't the future he had imagined when he'd wandered into Hilaris, broken and purposeless. It was infinitely more complex, more challenging, and more meaningful than anything he could have envisioned for himself. And as the silver patterns on his skin pulsed with the energy of possibilities yet to unfold, Oron Sol, eternal guardian of the Chaira, embraced the path that lay before him, own step, one choice, one day at a time.